God shall comfort you. My salvation and deliverance shall always be. Friends, welcome to American Baptist Church. I'm glad that you have chosen to worship with us this evening. What I just sang is a song I wrote for Isaiah, and this is our call to worship song. I want you to sort of imagine that as we've been going through the stories in Genesis, and now we're moving into the stories of Exodus, this line of belief that is building that God is somehow present, not only with the people in the stories that we are talking about, but present with us, and present perhaps in surprising ways. So last time we talked about Joseph and his brothers, and how his brothers betrayed him, and Joseph was not necessarily a good little brother. We remember that. He was kind of a pain in the neck, but his brothers still, he didn't deserve to be left for dead, that's for sure. And then, you know what happened at the end of that story? The brothers came to him not knowing that it was Joseph. They came to him out of a need. Now Joseph maybe toyed with them a little bit, much like a cat might toy with a mouse before it kills it. But Joseph did not punish his brothers. Instead, he welcomed them. When Joseph made himself known to them, he wept. He wept on the arms of his brother Benjamin, and he wept with his brothers. And then his father found out, and his father wept. Isaac wept. There was a reconciliation. There was a joining back together. And it might have been a different story had Joseph not been in a position of power. He was, after all, right underneath the king, and the king at that time was so excited and just basically gave Joseph whatever he wanted and needed, and he also took care of Joseph's brothers and their families. Joseph had a very, very important part in the life of that place. Now, something happens to us sometimes when we forget where we come from, when we forget those who came before us and the work that they did so that we could be here. We forget the traumas that they experienced and what they endured so that they could just survive another day. And that, in a way, is what I see these stories about in the Hebrew Scriptures. They're a way for us to recognize ourselves in them. Certainly a way for us, there's certainly a warning for us, let's say that, but they're also a reminder for us that God was present with them, and God is present with us too today. So this reading in Isaiah, which is going to be our call to worship, the song is, I wrote a while back, and it is the word of God. It's God speaking to the Israelites, God speaking to us, perhaps. It's a promise. It's a reminder that just as God was with Abraham and Sarah and Isaac and Israel and Joseph and all of them, Rachel, Rebecca, Hagar, just as God was with all of them, God can be with us today too. Now, the way that we see it, we'd like to think that maybe we could get some real snappy, snazzy visuals for that, and we don't always get that, because what we have learned from the Scriptures, certainly what we'll learn from the story today, and what we've learned from our lives, is that God works valiantly through other people, even when it puts their own lives at risk. So friends, I'm going to ask my husband to move the light behind the camera so you can see me a little bit better. One of the lights behind the camera. And we're going to begin with he's so good. Let's give Jim a hand. He's such a good guy behind the camera, like on the other side of the camera. I know it's hard because I don't think you guys can see me very well. Maybe I've got it all wrong. Do I have it wrong, Jim?
I can see you fine.
You can tell me if I have it wrong. Of course, now I'm blinded and can't see you, but that's okay. I think you might be able to see me a little bit better. So, So join me in worship as we sing our response, our sung response, and we have the call to worship, which is right up there. And I invite you to imagine what need it is that you have. Just conjure up that need that you have for God's presence, and to imagine that God is speaking to you in this moment, at this time, with these words. And the lyrics are found at the top of this post, and they go like this. God says, "Listen to me, O my people. Look to the rock from which you were made. The Lord your God will comfort you. My salvation and deliverance shall always be." And you are invited to read along the part of all as Jim reads the whole thing. So let's sing this. Listen to me, oh my people. Look to the rock from which you were made. The Lord your God shall comfort you. My salvation and deliverance shall always be.
Listen to me, you who look for righteousness, you who seek the Lord. Look to the rock from which you were cut, into the quarry where you were dug. Look to Abraham, your ancestor, and to Sarah, who gave you birth. They were alone when I called them, but I blessed them and made them many. The Lord will comfort Zion. The Lord will comfort all her ruins. The Lord will make her desert like Eden, and her wilderness like the Lord's garden. Happiness and joy will be found in her, thanks and the sound of singing.
Listen to me, oh my people. Look to the rock from which you were made. The Lord your God shall comfort you. My salvation and deliverance shall always be.
Pay attention to me, my people. Listen to me, my nation. For teaching will go out from me, my justice as a light to the nations. I will quickly bring my victory. My salvation is on its way, and my arm will judge the peoples. The coastlands hope for me. They wait for my judgment. Look up to the heavens and gaze at the earth beneath. The heavens will disappear like smoke. The earth will wear out like clothing, and its inhabitants will die like gnats. But my salvation will endure forever, and my righteousness will be unbroken.
Listen to me, oh my people. Look to the rock from which you were made. The Lord your God shall comfort you. My salvation and deliverance shall always be. My salvation and deliverance shall always be. My salvation and deliverance shall always be. Evan Drake Howard wrote, "We don't always feel God's presence, just as we don't feel the sun on a rainy day. But the presence never grows dim, and the confidence that it is there and will shine again keeps us hopeful." Thank you for watching our evening of Evan Drake Howard. What you just heard there was my husband his phone went off, and we were listening earlier to the reports from the Cameron Peak fire, which is just over there. And we've also been keeping tabs on another fire, which is just over there. And we know that many of you are getting ready to evacuate or have already evacuated. And whether you're here in Colorado or in California or Arizona or New Mexico or Utah or Nevada, many places where there are fires right now. And so we want you to know that our prayers are with you. And at this time, we can be very afraid. I don't know how some of you are with this sort of thing, whether it's a hurricane happening in Iowa or a hurricane happening in South Carolina. Hurricanes, fires, tornadoes, weather, it can feel like it's going to grab you by the ankle sometimes. So please know, my friends, that we are in this with you. And some of us feel, I know I do, like there's a fire just at my heels and going to take me away to Never Land. And so what do we have to do? We have to prepare. We have to check in on one another, make sure that everyone is okay. Look out for the least of these, those who maybe do not have a safe place to go. And watch our hearts. Watch our hearts. And this next little section, we're going to combine a little bit of the prayer and the confession. I want us to think about all that there is in our hearts, all that we may have kept hidden from ourselves, from God, from people who love us, people we care about. Think about those parts of ourselves that maybe there is a door to it and we dare not even open it. Maybe much like Joseph's brothers, maybe we're filled with guilt and shame. Maybe we did something or didn't do something that we should have done, and we are living a lie that results in the only way. It's the only way that we can really survive is to live that lie. Remember the lie that Joseph's brothers said. They said that their brother was killed by a wild animal, and they had to live into that lie, or else they couldn't cope each day. And so maybe it's something like that, and maybe it's also a way that we feel about ourselves. You know, a lot of us I know that watch this, a lot of us are in recovery, and some of us are trying to be in recovery, and some of us are lost in addiction or lost in whatever world it is that we might be lost in, and it can feel like hopelessness. It can feel much like we are just going to be swallowed up in that fire and we're just going to let it happen. And it's a scary place to be. You're not alone if you're in that place. I invite you to look deeply and open up what parts of yourself you can, whatever parts of yourself you can, to love. Open it up to grace, just the littlest possibility that there might be something for you, that there might be a day when you're free from your addiction or from whatever it is that afflicts you, from your shame and guilt and self-hate and self-loathing and all those things that we can have that can take center stage in our lives. That's what the confession is about. And really, isn't that what prayer is about? You know, one of the things we're going to be talking about in a little bit is how it is that God was present for this little baby. It seems like, how could God be present for this baby when the baby was floating in a basket on a river? That's what happens. I won't get too far ahead of myself. But people come along. They hear that voice of God, or they hear that voice of justice, and they step in. Because how can a baby protect itself? The baby can't even climb out or roll over. The baby was just born, a newborn, precious, little, innocent, helpless baby. And so as we think about these prayers that are deep on our hearts, let's also think about the ways that God might also be calling us, even in this time where we're opening ourselves up to God and God's presence, where God might be nudging us. Oh, I want you to be me here. I want you to imitate me here. Go help this person. Be with this person. Share with this person your deepest secret. You never know who you're going to help when you do that. So before we enter into our time of silence, where we will lift up all of our prayers, I want to read something. This is from Marilyn Robinson from her book, Gilead. She says this: theologians talk about a prevenient grace that precedes grace itself and allows us to accept it. I think there must also be a prevenient courage that allows us to be brave. That is, to acknowledge that there is more beauty than our eyes can bear. That precious things have been put into our hands, and to do nothing to honor them is to do great harm. And therefore, this courage allows us, as the old men said, to make ourselves useful. It allows us to be generous, which is another way of saying exactly the same thing. Friends, we will start with silence. Invite God into the silence, however it is that you find God, into the space, into yourself. And then I'll play a little something, and then we'll move into our Lord's Prayer. Will you pray with me? Our Creator, Father and Mother of us all who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debts, as we forgive our debtors. Do not abandon us in temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory forever and ever. Amen. So, my friends, now it's time for a little story. It was a few hundred years later, basically, when this happened, we have this king. It's a new king. Now, I, believe it or not, have a song for this scripture too. Maybe I will teach it to you right now so that when the time comes for us to really, really sing it, you're going to know it inside and out. And then, by the way, you'll know the scripture. Now, for me to teach you this song, there's a few things that you need to know. And that is that the song was written actually a few years ago, but it was written I wrote it in such a way that I wanted you to really feel the words. I want you to feel them forming in your mouth, feel them forming in your body, feel the movement of the rhythm. And so we're going to learn it this way. First, I will tell you the words. And it's basically, by golly, it's very hot in here because we have to keep the windows closed because there's a lot of smoke outside. So please bear with me as I fan myself. But we have in the song basically the whole story. Well, kind of. I mean, we're missing a couple key ingredients. I'll tell you what's missing in this song. Missing in this song are the two midwives. Now, they're very important, and you will hear their names later. Very important. But I want you to remember, they are not in this song only because it didn't work out right. So what we have are these lyrics. A new king came to power in Egypt. A new king who did not know Joseph. So all those stories about Joseph and the old king and the pharaohs and all of this king didn't know. So this king, by the way, I don't care how long ago it was. If you're a leader, you should know the history of your country and you should know those people who are really important. And this pharaoh already we know. We don't know. The pharaoh does not have a name, by the way. We don't know who it was. It could have been Ramses, but we don't know. And there was, did not know their own history. Didn't know the history of the people they were ruling over, didn't know the history of the pharaohs and the kings of the time, because they did not know Joseph. And Joseph surely was someone who's going to stand out in history. So, did not know Joseph. This pharaoh tried to take away the power of the people. The pharaoh, imagine this, the pharaoh wanted to keep all the power that he could just to himself. So, but Pharaoh's own beloved daughter saw a baby in a basket floating down the river Nile, and she drew the baby from the water, and she named him, guess what? Moses. So we're going to learn this song for a minute, and what I want you to do is feel the words, beloved daughter, feel the words forming in your mouth, baby in a basket. Feel that forming as you sing it. Feel also forming, floating, this business of floating down the river Nile. Now, the rhythm gets a little more heated, floating down the river Nile as she drew him from the water and she named him Moses. And when we get to Moses, I want you to have a nice good M on Moses. But feel how the rhythm changes a little bit and it kind of speeds up and it almost dances just a little bit. I want you to feel that dancing because the beginning is pretty darn hopeless. Now, I'll tell you right now so that we learn the song, you'll know the context a little bit better. The Pharaoh was really angry and wanted to kill all the newborn baby boys. That's a horrible thing. Horrible. But the midwives, he asked the midwives to help out and gee, they, you know what, they did not help Pharaoh. Instead, they came up with a silly story, which you'll hear in a little bit. But he was really, really insecure. He was worried, I think, that somebody would come along and take away all his toys. All the toys that he could play with, which were really not just toys, not just objects, but people, human beings that he was messing around with. He wanted to have all of that power. And he had such an immature self-image and sense of self-worth that he wanted to take the self-worth of other people. And so he did that. He tried anyway, but I don't know how many. I believe that not one single baby perished in this, because those midwives were so cool and super smart. And then not only were they disobeying him like blatantly in his face, because he was such a child, he was like having temper tantrums all over the place, but his own daughter did too. His own daughter saw this baby boy, right? That was the gender of the baby, and that was the gender that was going to be wiped out. And his own daughter took care of the baby herself. So this is a very interesting story. So I'm going to sing you this song, and hopefully you can pick it up, and we'll sing it again a couple times during the little message. A new king came to power in Egypt, a new king who did not know Joseph. The Pharaoh thought he'd take away the power of the people. Then Pharaoh's own beloved daughter saw a baby in a basket rolling down the river Nile, and she drew him from the water, and she named him Moses. So why don't you try that with me? A new king came to power in Egypt, a new king who did not know Joseph. The Pharaoh thought he'd take away the power of the people, but then Pharaoh's own beloved daughter saw a baby in a basket going down the river Nile, and she drew him from the water, and she named him Moses. You ready for the story? Let's begin. Now a new king came to power in Egypt who didn't know Joseph. He said to his people, "The Israelite people are now larger in number and stronger than we are. Come on, let's be smart and deal with them. Otherwise, they will only grow in number. And if war breaks out, they will join our enemies, fight against us, and escape from the land." As a result, the Egyptians put foremen of forced work gangs over the Israelites to harass them with hard labor. In other words, they became slaves. They had to build storage cities named Pithom and Ramses for Pharaoh. But the more they were oppressed, the more they grew and spread. So much that the Egyptians started to look at the Israelites with disgust and dread. So the Egyptians enslaved the Israelites. They made their lives miserable with the hard labor making mortar and bricks, doing field work, and by forcing them to do all kinds of other cruel work. And wouldn't you want to do the same thing? I mean, after all, they were growing. They were doing well. Remember that jealousy thing that we were talking about last week, when Joseph's brothers were a little bit jealous because Joseph had the favor of Jacob, and everybody seemed to like Joseph, and they had this wonderful dream code, and he kept having all these dreams about how wonderful he was, and how the brothers were going to worship him, and all this other crazy stuff. They got so jealous. Remember, we talked about the importance of dealing with your jealousy and your insecurities and your fears around that last week. Well, these people did not deal with it well, and I kind of imagine that Pharaoh fed into their insecurities. I'll bet you anything that Pharaoh saw that these people were afraid. They were afraid that they were going to be taken over by the Jews, and golly, they did not. Pharaoh wanted to maintain his power, and the best way to maintain power, my friends, over a whole mass group of people is to make them afraid of the other, so that you can still have control over them, but you trick them into thinking, they're the ones in control because they're enslaving these other people, when really they're all enslaved to the power that be, and that is Pharaoh. And I'm sure we have no stories like that in our lives today. So back to the story. Verse 15. The king of Egypt spoke to two Hebrew midwives named Shiphrah and Puah. When you are helping the Hebrew women give birth and you see the baby being born, if it's a boy, kill him. But if it's a girl, you can let her live. Now the two midwives respected God. They did not respect Pharaoh. And you can even imagine, I don't know what was going on in their heads, because it sounds so ridiculous that a ruler would say something like that, and yet they do, by golly, would say something like that and have so much irreverence for children and a baby and the innocent. Who does that kind of thing? Well, a real jerk does, and that was what Pharaoh was doing right there. He was kind of being a real jerk, and he said, "You kill those little boys." As if the midwives, whose job it is to bring babies into life, into being on this earth separated from the womb, they're going to listen to him. Well, they did not listen to him. So remember those names, Shiphrah and Puah. They were the two midwives who did not listen to Pharaoh, who spoke out against, who worked against Pharaoh and his ideas, and probably rolled their eyes in the back of their head at the insanity and ridiculousness of Pharaoh's being. So, you know what they did? They let the baby boys live. Wouldn't you do the same thing? They let the baby boys, but now maybe their lives were probably in danger had Pharaoh found out that they did this, that they were against him, but they let those baby boys live. The two midwives said to Pharaoh, because Hebrew women aren't like Egyptian women. They're much stronger, and they give birth before any midwives can get to them. They're so strong, these women. So God treated the midwives well, and the people kept on multiplying and became very, very strong. And because the midwives respected God, God gave them households of their own. Now, I'm going to check in here with someone and see who's here. Hi, Heather. I'm so sorry I didn't wave to you earlier. It's good to have you here. I just needed to take a break because it's really hot in here. And the story's getting really intense. I mean, these midwives could get in a whole lot of trouble, don't you think, if they got caught? But guess what? They didn't get caught. And even if they knew they were going to get caught, I believe that Shiphrah and Puah would have done it anyway. They knew what was right, and they stood up against this king who really wasn't very smart, but also was very insecure and cruel. And they stood up against him because it was the right thing to do. Now, I want to just make a mention here. It's very interesting, isn't it? They used Pharaoh's own racism against him. So if we think about it in modern days, right? One of the stories that people have said all through the years, through back into slavery times, was that African American males were superhuman in their strength, and the women too. They were all superhuman in their strength, and that's why they had to use so much strength, and that's why they had to control them so much, because they were so strong, right? So this is something that I believe that Pharaoh believed about the Hebrews. And not only that, but the people believed it too. We just read about it, that they were so strong and they were growing and they were going to take over the world. And when really they just wanted to have families and be safe and eat their meals together and worship their God together. So these are stories that people tell so that they can then go and oppress others. And we still have those stories today. Just the story with dear Elijah McClain. God rest his soul, but keep his memory and his name alive. Dear Elijah McClain, 140-pound young man massage therapist who, by the way, played the violin for stray animals. Remember this. Keep him in your mind and his name on your mouth, on your lips, as all the other names as well. But one of the things that they said about this 140-pound boy, young man, was that he was so super strong that they needed all three cops to jump on him and pin him down, and that that he looked like he weighed 200 pounds, and so he needed all that medicine to calm him down for a 200-pound man. That's one of the things that happened to him, and friends, he is not here today. We still perpetuate that lie. But what these women did is they knew that Pharaoh had this racism in him, and they used that not to further oppress people, but to free people, to make it so these babies would be born and they would be safe. Very smart women. So, God treated these midwives well, and the people kept on multiplying, and of course they became very strong. And because the midwives respected God, God gave them households of their own. Then Pharaoh gave an order to all his people. Throw every baby boy born to the Hebrews into the Nile River. But you can let all the girls live. So he gave that to all of his people. These people who are living under Pharaoh's rule. These people, these Egyptians, who are also afraid that what's theirs might be taken from them, that their opportunities might be lost to them because of these Hebrew people that they have enslaved. Now, a man from Levi's household married a Levite woman. The woman became pregnant and gave birth to a son. She saw that the baby was healthy and beautiful, so she hid him for 3 months. When she couldn't hide him any longer, she took a reed basket, sealed it up with black tar. She put the child in the basket and set the basket among the reeds at the riverbank. The baby's older sister stood watch nearby to see what would happen to her little brother. The Pharaoh's insane policies, which from the outside any person with a brain would look at and say, this man should not be in power. But he was able to manipulate and control so many of his people, not all of the Egyptians, mind you, but so many of them because they too were afraid. And he made them more afraid. That this woman, in order to protect this beautiful, healthy baby, which is a big deal, my friends, because a lot of babies didn't make it. A lot of women didn't make it past childbirth. This beautiful, healthy baby, what would ever cause her to let go? Knowing that her baby's life was at risk. She put the baby in a basket and pushed him up the Nile. And I imagine that this mother thought to herself, God, please, 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 somebody pick him up and take care of him. Maybe she thought an Egyptian might pick him up and care for him as their own, knowing that mothers all around the world, no matter what their race or ethnicity, they all feel a bond and a need to care for babies. Well, someone did come to the rescue. Pharaoh's daughter. Now, Pharaoh's daughter doesn't have a name here. The mom doesn't have a name, and the Pharaoh doesn't have a name. Nobody, very few people are named in this. The two midwives, they are named Shiphrah and Puah, and the baby is named at the end of this. But all these people are equally important. Pharaoh's daughter came down to bathe in the river. Now, I just want to remind you that Pharaoh had said, any baby boys that you have to put them in the Nile, like a little child. He said that, like a little, 10-year-old or 5-year-old temper tantrum, maybe a 5-year-old, maybe a 7-year-old temper tantrum. And she might have known, we don't know, but she might have known that there might be babies. She might have been a secret operative going down to the Nile. I'm going to go bathe in the Nile, Dad. And she went down and started bathing, but really looking out. I imagine she was looking out and she saw in through the reeds something moving. Pharaoh's daughter came down to bathe in the river while her women servants, now those are slaves, walked along beside the river. She saw the basket among the reeds, and she sent one of her servants to bring it to her. When she opened the basket, she saw the child. The boy was crying, and she felt sorry for him. I imagine that when we think about feeling sorry for someone, often that in the Hebrew scriptures and in the Greek scriptures, certainly it's not a feeling sorry up here in the heart. It is a feeling sorry. It's a pain in the gut. It was a gut pain that she felt, and she knew that she had to do something for this child. She said, "This must be one of the Hebrew children." The baby's sister said to Pharaoh's daughter, "Would you like me to go and find one of the Hebrew women to nurse the child for you?" Pharaoh's daughter agreed. "Yes, do that." So the girl went and called the child's mother. Pharaoh's daughter said to her, "Take this child and nurse it for me, and I'll pay you for your work." I wonder if Pharaoh's daughter knew that she was the boy's mother. I wonder if she knew her father was a cruel person who was acting out his own insecurities on a whole group of people. I wonder if she too maybe felt some of that. Maybe she too, being a female and not a male, maybe she too felt her own father's insecurities against her. Maybe she understood her dad and she was hoping that he would change. Whatever the answer is, she knew the right thing to do, just like Sephora and Pua knew the right thing to do. Pharaoh's daughter said to her, "So take this child," said to the mother. "Take this child and nurse it for me, and I'll pay you for your work." The woman took the child and nursed the child. After the child had grown up, she brought him back to Pharaoh's daughter, who adopted him as her son. She named him Moses because, she said, "I pulled him out of the water." Now, friends, this is a story of struggle and trauma and abuse and enslavement. And it might trigger up some feelings in some of us, especially people who care for children and babies, and maybe people who have lost children. We think in this story not only about the baby who would become Moses, not only about the mom who somehow magically got to take care of her own baby and then had to give him back when he was older. We think also about what it means to stand up against power, to speak truth to power in a different way, to bring about justice and righteousness in a sneaky way, in a way from a position not of power, but of weakness. And in that weakness, finding incredible strength. So how about you all? Where is it that there might be a baby in a basket that needs your attention? Where is it that you might need to be God's presence for another person? You notice God didn't swoop down and pull all the babies out, rescue them. God had people that God spoke to, whether they knew that God was speaking to them or not. And certainly Pharaoh's daughter believed in other gods, but yet she was able to do the right thing. So where is this today for us? Maybe it's in working with people who are homeless, or maybe it's in working with people with addictions, or maybe it's in dealing with the financial inequities in this world, the economic inequities, the climate change. Maybe it's in Black Lives Matter, and maybe it's in working through our racism. We have ancestors that have walked this path before us. Not only ancestors of blood, but ancestors in humanity. And some of them have done terrible, terrible things. But others have listened to that voice. And when they saw the baby in the basket, they picked that baby up. They made sure that baby was fed and nursed and loved more than any other person could love that baby. Who could love the baby more than Moses' own mother? They make sure that there's somebody on the side, somebody on the wings, just double checking to see what's going to happen. So let's try this song again, and we'll sing it through 2 more times and see how it goes for you. Notice how it settles differently for you in your body, whether you're singing it or listening. Notice what might jump out at you more. Notice how God might be speaking to you in this moment with these words, with this story, and how it is alive for us today. A new king came to power in Egypt, a new king who did not know Joseph. The Pharaoh thought he'd take away the power of the people, but then Pharaoh's own beloved daughter saw a baby in a basket going down the river Nile, and she drew him from the water, and she named him Moses. And she drew him from the water, and she named him Moses. My friends, may the peace of Christ be with you. And if you see a baby in a basket, maybe give it a little hug and a binky. Bye, everyone. Mwah. Much love to each of you.